Dominic stood in front of the glass entrance of the most polished car dealership he had ever seen, staring at the reflection, looking back at him, worn leather shoes buffed to their last shine, a pale blue dress shirt ironed flat at every crease, even though the collar had started to fray. In the breast pocket was a folded sheet of paper, 12 years of engineering work for one of the most decorated racing teams in the Americas. He had not come here to beg. He had come because Ella, his 6-year-old daughter, asleep in a car seat in an old Honda, parked at the far edge of the lot, needed dinner tonight. The dealership did not know that. Not yet. Don't close this story yet. The moment Charlotte walks through that door will change everything you thought you knew about what a man is worth. The alarm on Dominic's phone had gone off at 5:45, but he had been awake since 4. He lay in the dark of the small 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet block on the outer edge of the city, listening to the faint sound of Ella breathing through the open door of the second room, and he thought about nothing at all. That was what the mornings had become. Not planning, not worrying, just listening to that small, steady sound until it was safe to get up. The kitchen light was yellow and low. He made coffee he would not drink, and stood at the counter with both hands around the mug, looking at the surface of the table. A reminder slip was tucked under the mug's base, printed from an email confirmation 3 days earlier. Interview, 9:15. Prestige Auto Group, downtown. Beside the reminder slip was a bill from the property management company. The overdue notice stamp across the top was red. 14 days past due. He did not pick it up. He had the number memorized. He had one tie. Ella had chosen it the night before, sitting cross-legged on his bed while he stood at the closet with 3 options laid across his arm. She had pointed to the blue one, without hesitating, a medium shade, solid, slightly too wide by current standards, but clean. That one, Daddy. That's the best one. He had believed her. He knotted the tie at the bathroom mirror, straightened it twice, and decided it was as good as it was going to get. The shirt was pale blue, which matched in a way that probably only a 6-year-old thought was deliberate, and the jacket was charcoal, which he had bought for a friend's wedding 7 years ago, and which still fit because he had not stopped moving long enough to change shape. He looked like a man who was trying. Whether that was enough depended on who was looking. The folder on the kitchen counter held his resume and 3 reference letters. 12 years at Meridian Racing, the top privately funded Formula America's team of the past decade. He had started there at 22 as a junior systems technician and worked his way to chief powertrain engineer before he was 30. The team had won consecutive top 3 finishes for 6 of the years he was there. The engines under those hoods had been rebuilt by hands that were now holding a coffee mug in a small apartment kitchen, waiting for the clock to move. He had left 3 years ago. Not for money, not for a better offer. He had left because his wife, Sarah, had died on a Tuesday in October, and when he came home from the hospital that night, he walked into a house where Ella was asleep in a crib she was almost too big for, and she did not know yet, and when she woke up the next morning and said, "Mama?" the way she did every morning, Dominic had understood with total clarity that there was nothing in the world, not a race, not a title, not a paycheck that mattered as much as the answer he gave to that question in the months ahead. He left Meridian 6 weeks later. The team called him 17 times in the following 6 months. He had let every call go to voicemail. He was not being dramatic. He was being a father, which was something he had only just learned how to do, and he did not trust himself to do both at once. For 2 years after, he worked as a freelance mechanic. Good work, reliable work, the kind of work where men who knew engines trusted him on site. He had been earning enough to keep things steady when the shop that contracted most of his hours closed without much warning. Overhead, the owner had said. That was 9 months ago. The savings had been patient, but they were not infinite. Ella came out of her room carrying Button, the stuffed rabbit she had been given at the hospital on the night she was born, which now had one slightly flattened ear and a small patch of worn fabric on its left cheek where she pressed it against her face when she slept. She was wearing her yellow pajamas, and her hair was sideways, and she looked at her father standing at the counter in his jacket and his tie, and her eyes went wide, the way they always did when she decided something was important. "You look very handsome," she said. "Thank you. Are they going to hire you?" He set the mug down and crouched to her level. He looked at her seriously, the way she deserved to be looked at. I'm going to try my best." She considered this for a moment with the gravity of someone who had thought about the matter deeply. Then she nodded. "Okay, you're wearing the good tie. They're going to like you." He held her small hand between both of his, for a second, warm, steady, certain in that uncomplicated way children have, of being certain, and then he stood and told her to eat her cereal while he went to start the car. The Honda started on the third try. He knew exactly what the problem was: a degraded crankshaft position sensor feeding inconsistent signal to the ECU, causing the ignition cycle to stall on the first 2 attempts before the system corrected. He could fix it in 20 minutes with the right part. The right part cost $42, which he did not have available right now. He put the car in reverse and pulled out of the lot. He drove Ella to the neighbor's house, Mrs. Ruth Gallagher, a retired schoolteacher 2 doors down who had been watching Ella on interview mornings, without being asked to, and without asking for anything back, which was a kindness Dominic had filed under the category of things he planned to repay as soon as he was able. Ella said goodbye to him at the door with button tucked under her arm and her yellow pajamas still on because Mrs. Gallagher let her stay in them until 10. He drove through the city in the early light, past the coffee shops that had lines out the door, and the office towers that were just beginning to light up from the inside, and when he turned onto the main commercial corridor and saw the building ahead, he understood immediately why the posting had specified business formal. The glass facade of Prestige Auto Group caught the morning sun and threw it back in every direction. The signage was brushed chrome. The row of vehicles in the showroom window, 8 of them, spaced like exhibits, began at $65,000 and climbed from there. The lot was clean enough to eat off. He parked at the far end, checked the mirror once, and got out. The inside of the dealership smelled like new leather and cool air and something faintly citrus that had probably come from a diffuser built into the ventilation. The music was low and formless, the kind of music designed to make you feel that money was a natural condition. The showroom floor was wide and pale, the kind of pale that showed every scuff. Dominic walked across it without scuffing it. The receptionist at the front desk was a young woman named Mia, mid-20s. Dark hair pulled back, a headset looped around her neck. She looked up when Dominic walked in, and her eyes did the thing that eyes sometimes did. A single, smooth downward pass, and then back to the screen. Professional, efficient, concluded. "Do you have an appointment?" Dominic Wells, 9:15 interview. She typed for a moment. "Waiting area on your left. There's a form on the chair." The waiting area had 4 chairs arranged around a low glass table. 3 of the chairs were occupied. The first held a man named Cameron. Dominic did not know his name yet, but would later, who was wearing a navy suit that fit the way suits fit when they were new, with a tie that had the particular sheen of something expensive, and a phone he was scrolling, with the casual disinterest of a person accustomed to waiting in places like this without it meaning anything. The second held a younger man with blonde hair, who was reviewing notes on a tablet with visible focus. The third held a woman in her late 20s, who glanced up when Dominic sat down and then looked back at her documents. Dominic took the 4th chair. He did not look at his phone. He sat with his back straight and his folder on his knees and his hands resting on top of the folder, and he was still. On the glass table was a spread of brochures. The top one was for the Orion X9, the model the manufacturer had released 8 months ago to considerable industry attention. The cover showed the car from a low angle against an overcast sky, the headline reading, "Engineered without compromise." Dominic looked at the technical specifications page visible beneath the cover. He had read the full spec sheet in February when the model launched. He had also, a month later, read a supplier change notice on a business-to-business component portal that most people outside of procurement and engineering had no reason to visit. He looked at the photo of the front brake assembly and pressed his lips together once. A door opened at the back of the showroom, and a man walked out. He was around 40, silver at the temples, wearing a suit that was more expensive than Cameron's, and walking with the particular confidence of someone who had held a middle position of authority for long enough that it had become his personality. He carried a clipboard. He looked at the clipboard, then at the room. "Cameron?" Cameron stood. The handshake between the two of them lasted longer than necessary and involved a forearm clasp. The man from the back, whose name, Dominic would learn shortly, was Jason Mercer, hiring manager and head of sales operations, was warmer in those first 3 seconds than he had been in the 2 seconds he'd scanned the rest of the room. Dominic waited. Cameron came out after 20 minutes, easy in the shoulders, already exchanging a name drop about a mutual acquaintance. The blonde man went in. 15 minutes. The woman went in. 12 minutes. And then it was quiet. Jason stood in the doorway and looked at the clipboard and then at Dominic. And in that moment, Dominic saw something pass through the man's expression that was not dislike and not recognition. It was something closer to a decision being made from insufficient information and insufficient interest in correcting that. It was the look of a man who had already decided and was treating the next 15 minutes as a formality. Dominic? Yes, the handshake was correct. 1 pump, released. Jason looked down at Dominic's hand for a fraction of a second, the calluses across the palm, the faint trace of grease at the base of the thumbnail that would not fully wash out no matter what, and then looked away. They walked to the interview room. Jason did not open the folder for the first 4 minutes. He sat behind a small desk with a glass surface and asked his questions from the clipboard, while Dominic's resume lay untouched between them, and the questions were the standard kind motivation, availability, familiarity with luxury brands delivered in the tone of someone who had asked them 3 times already that morning and found none of the answers interesting. "How familiar are you with high-net-worth clients?" Jason asked. "I've worked alongside them. Drivers at the level I was supporting had a combined net worth most people don't encounter in a lifetime. The work was the same regardless." Jason wrote something on the clipboard, or appeared to. Dominic had the impression the pen was mostly moving for the sake of the gesture. "This position is client-facing," Jason said. "The technical side is secondary. Our customers don't need the engine explained to them. They need to feel understood. I can do both. Most people say that. I know. I'm saying it because it's true, not because it's expected." Jason looked up. A brief flicker, not respect, more like recalibration, the way a person recalibrates when they realize the other person is not going to give them the easy version. Then he finally opened the folder. He turned through the pages without reading them. His eyes tracked the dates, the job titles, the gaps. Dominic watched him stop on the departure date from Meridian Racing and then look up. "Meridian Racing," Jason said. "I don't know that name. They're based in Charlotte, North Carolina. Top 3 finishes in Formula Americas for 6 of my 12 years there. They were the top privately funded team on the circuit in 2019 and 2020. Jason turned the page. "And you left for personal reasons." It was not a question. It was a label. Dominic heard the word personal, the way Jason meant it as a polite container for something that disqualified. "Yes. Then you were freelance." Another pause. This time on the word freelance, the half-beat of a man deciding where on a hierarchy to place something. "Independent contractor. Engine diagnostics and systems work. Primarily commercial and performance vehicles. And you've been out of formal employment for 9 months." "Correct." Jason set the folder down and straightened it on the desk the way people straighten things when they are deciding how to end a conversation. "What do you know about the Orion X9? We just brought in our first full consignment." It was the only genuine question Jason had asked. Dominic answered it. "Hybrid drivetrain, 2nd generation AWD architecture. Real-time torque vectoring across all 4 wheels, 312 kilowatts combined output, 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. The ride calibration is softer than the previous generation, which will read as more comfortable to most buyers, but may disappoint the performance subset." He paused. "There's also a potential brake wear issue front axle, related to the angle of the ventilation bracket. The supplier changed their tolerance spec last August. It's a small deviation, but it compounds over mileage." Jason blinked. "You read that off the manufacturer's website?" "I read the supplier change notice on Kepler Components' B2B portal. They updated their bracket tolerance by 0.15 degrees when they changed production facilities. It won't be visible until around 6,000 miles, but the left front disc will wear faster than the right." There was a silence. "Not the comfortable kind. We don't need someone to diagnose the cars," Jason said. "We need someone to sell them. I'd think a client spending $100,000 would want both." The room was quiet again. Jason looked at his watch clearly, deliberately. Then he picked up the folder and tapped it once on the desk to square the edges. "Thank you for coming in, Dominic. We'll be in touch." It was the sentence everyone knew the meaning of. Dominic had heard it before. He did not stand immediately. He let one measured beat pass, and then he asked, with a voice that was entirely level, "Can you tell me the specific reason?" Jason's expression shifted, not discomfort exactly, more the slight irritation of a man who expected the formality to end cleanly. "This position requires industry experience, sales culture, client management, luxury brand fluency. Your background is technical. My background is 12 years of technical work at the highest competitive level in North American motorsport, followed by independent diagnostic and service work across commercial and performance segments. I have both categories of experience. You have racing experience." The emphasis Jason placed on the word racing was small but deliberate, a feather placed on a scale to tip it. "This is luxury retail. It's a different world." From the hallway outside the room, through the door that had swung slightly ajar, a figure passed. It was Isaac, a man in his mid-50s, hair going to salt and pepper, wearing a gray work shirt with the dealership logo above the breast pocket. He slowed almost imperceptibly when he caught a fragment of the conversation, looked through the gap at Dominic for a moment, and then continued down the hall without a word. "Good luck to you," Jason said, standing. Dominic stood. He straightened his jacket. He picked up his folder and held it at his side. He met Jason's eyes with a nod, a single, clean, professional nod, and then walked out. He was in the hallway, 4 steps from the interview room door, when he heard Jason speak to someone inside in a lowered voice. Not fully lowered, enough to hear, "Trade guy. I don't know why they think this is the right room for them." Dominic did not stop walking. He came out into the showroom and stood for a moment in the open space between the rows of cars. Mia looked up from the front desk and read the situation in 2 seconds. She looked back at her screen. There was nothing unkind in it. It was just the way the morning had arranged itself. He should have walked to the door. He knew that. The parking lot was 60 feet away, and his car was at the far end, and there was nothing keeping him in this building now. But he did not go to the door. Instead, without quite deciding to, he walked toward the center display. The Orion X9 stood under the main overhead track, lighting matte black, every panel surface, a slow curve, from one angle to the next. The dealership had it positioned at a slight angle to the entrance, the way a first impression is positioned. Most people saw the shape and the color and the price card. Dominic looked at the front left wheel well. He crouched. The ventilation bracket, the component that directed cooling airflow across the brake rotor, was set at an angle he recognized from the supplier notice he had read in late winter. Not wrong enough to be dangerous today, wrong enough to matter at 6,000 miles, at which point the left front rotor would show uneven wear and the customer, whoever they were, would bring the car back confused and slightly betrayed. "Can't afford that one." The voice came from his left. Isaac had circled back from wherever the hallway led and was standing a few feet away with his hands in his pockets, watching Dominic with a look that was dry and not unfriendly. "I know," Dominic said. He did not stand up right away. The ventilation bracket on the front axle is installed at the wrong angle, off by about 2, maybe 2.5 degrees from the spec. Whoever installed the cars on the transport probably didn't notice. It's not the kind of thing you catch visually, unless you know to look. Isaac did not respond for a moment. Then he moved closer and looked at the same spot. He was quiet for about 10 seconds. "You were in the interview," Isaac said. It was not a question. "Just came out. How'd it go?" "I wasn't the right fit." Isaac made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. The sound of a person who has been at a job long enough to understand exactly what that phrase covered. He looked at Dominic with the kind of attention that was different from the attention Jason had given him, not evaluating, just present. "You know your way around a brake assembly," Isaac said. "Among other things." Isaac nodded slowly, the way people nod when they are filing something away rather than responding to it. He said nothing else, and Dominic straightened up and walked to the front desk. Mia watched him come. He took a business card from the small stack in his shirt pocket, plain white, his name, a phone number, and below his name in a smaller font, * Powertrain Systems Engineer Meridian Racing 2010 to 2022 times. And he set it on the desk in front of her. If the dealership needs a technical consult on the Orion X9, the brake issue I mentioned to your technician, please feel free to reach out. Mia looked at the card. She looked at him. There was something in her expression that had not been there when he walked in. Not pity, not admiration. Something closer to reassessment. Dominic nodded once and turned toward the door. He had taken 5 steps when the main entrance opened. There was no announcement. No particular sound beyond the soft mechanical give of the glass door on its pneumatic hinge. But the air in the showroom changed in a way that Dominic felt across his shoulders before he turned around the particular atmospheric shift of a space reorienting toward a single point. He had felt it before, on race weekends when the team principal walked into the garage. A kind of collective attention, quiet and immediate. Mia straightened. 2 salesmen near the far display case stopped their conversation mid-sentence, and from the front desk came Mia's voice, softer and more careful than anything she had said all morning. "Good morning, Miss Charlotte." She did not look like a CEO in the way the word sometimes conjures no power blazer, no studied authority in the bearing, no entourage. Charlotte Voss wore a cognac-colored leather jacket over a dark blouse, fitted trousers, low-heeled ankle boots. Her hair was dark brown and pulled back simply, not arranged. She carried a tablet under one arm and a small folder of documents under the other. She was 35 years old and owned controlling interest in a group of 14 luxury automotive dealerships across 6 states, which she had built from a single, struggling import outlet she had taken over at 27 from a retiring uncle who had expected her to sell it within 2 years. She did not make an entrance. She simply arrived. Her eyes moved through the showroom, the way the eyes of someone who owns something move through it, not possessively, but with a particular quality of attention, the kind that is constantly comparing what is there to what should be there. She scanned the vehicle positions, the lighting angles, the floor. She stopped for a fraction of a second on the Orion X9. Then her eyes moved to Dominic. He had turned when the room shifted. He was standing 7 feet from the front desk, his folder under his arm, his jacket straightened, his expression completely neutral. He was clearly not a customer, not dressed for it, not positioned for it. He had the posture of someone who had just finished something and was in the transition before whatever came next. Charlotte walked toward the front desk. Her pace did not change. She looked at the business card on the counter. Mia, who had not moved it, felt the temperature of that look and stayed quiet. Charlotte picked the card up. She read it. She turned it over. She turned it back. Then she looked at Dominic directly, without preamble. "You just interviewed here?" "I did." "How did it go?" "I wasn't offered the position." She looked at the card again. "Meridian Racing." "How long?" 12 years. "What was your role at the end?" "Chief Powertrain Engineer." "Last 3 years." The showroom around them was not silent. The ventilation still hummed. The music still played its formless loop, but within the immediate radius of their conversation, everything had gone still in that particular way that happens when people nearby are listening without appearing to. Charlotte's expression did not change in the way expressions change when someone is impressed. It changed in the way expressions change when someone recognizes something they were looking for without knowing they were looking. "You told the technician something about the Orion X9, she said. "Brake ventilation bracket on the front axle. The supplier changed their production tolerance last August by a small margin when they shifted facilities. The angular deviation is minor, just over 2 degrees, but under repeated thermal cycling across 6,000 or so miles, the left front rotor is going to wear asymmetrically. The customer will notice handling variance and come back with a complaint that's hard to attribute without knowing what you're looking for." Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then, "You saw this from the showroom floor." "I know what I'm looking for." She looked at him. Not quickly, not slowly, steadily, the way someone looks at something they are deciding how to categorize. He met her gaze without performing anything. Jason appeared from the back hallway. He had heard Mia's greeting and had come out adjusted, posture easy, expression ready, the professional warmth he had not offered Dominic now fully deployed. "Charlotte, we weren't expecting you today." "I don't give notice when I visit the stores," she said, without looking at him. She already knew this. Jason already knew. She already knew this. Of course. He settled into the acknowledgement smoothly. Then he noticed the configuration of the conversation: Charlotte, the business card, Dominic, and the smoothness tightened, very slightly, at the edges. I see you've met our... This is one of the applicants from this morning's round. Unfortunately, not quite the match we needed for the role. He identified a technical defect in your display vehicle, Charlotte said. On the floor. Without tools. Jason paused. Well, Isaac would have... Has Isaac reported anything about the Orion X9 this week? A beat. No, not specifically. Go find Isaac and ask him to pull the front left brake assembly on Unit 3 in the technical bay. The instruction was delivered without drama. Jason received it the same way, because there was no other option. He nodded and went. Charlotte turned back to Dominic. Her voice dropped one register, not warmer exactly, but less formal. The voice someone uses when they are speaking to a person rather than to a situation. Do you have 15 minutes? He considered the question as though it were a real question, which he appreciated. Yes. Come with me. She led him not to a conference room, but to the technical bay at the rear of the building. A wide, clean space with 4 hydraulic lifts, overhead tool racks, and the specific smell of brake fluid and machine oil that Dominic associated, without nostalgia exactly, with most of his working life. A second Orion X9 was up on one of the lifts at mid-height, wheels off, rotors exposed. She walked to the lifted car and stood beside it, looking up at the front axle assembly. Then she looked at Dominic. Show me, she said. He stepped in. He did not need to touch anything. He looked at the bracket mounting point, turned slightly to bring the overhead light across the angle, and pointed to the specific degree of deviation where the bracket met the caliper housing, where the airflow channel would be marginally redirected across 6,000 miles of heating and cooling cycles. He explained it the way he would explain it to a fellow engineer, without simplification, without performance. Charlotte asked questions. They were exact questions. She was not testing him. She was learning, and there was a difference, and he could tell the difference. Isaac came in halfway through the explanation and stood to one side without interrupting. When Dominic finished, Isaac looked at the bracket for a long moment and then said, quietly, I've looked at these cars for 3 weeks. I didn't catch that. You'd have to know that Kepler Components changed suppliers for the bracket casting in August, Dominic said. It's in their portal under technical notifications. Most people outside procurement don't track that level. Charlotte was watching him. How do you track it? Habit. When I was at Meridian, we had supplier spec sheets from 43 component vendors. I built a monitoring system for change notices because a deviation we didn't catch once cost us a race in 2017. After that, I read everything. She nodded once. Then she said, Why did you leave Meridian? The question was direct and personal, and she asked it without apology, which was somehow the right way to ask it. He answered the same way. My wife died 3 years ago. I have a daughter, she was 3 at the time. She needed me home. Charlotte did not say she was sorry. She did not fill the silence with language. She looked at him for a moment and then nodded, the nod of someone who has processed something real rather than deflected it. What's her name? Ella. Something changed in Charlotte's face. Then a small, involuntary thing, a brief warmth that did not fit the professional register and that she did not try to hide. That's a beautiful name. She's a good kid, Dominic said, which was an enormous understatement. But he was not the kind of man who said enormous things about the people he loved. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Her tablet was under her arm. She was not looking at it. She was looking at the car, and then at him, and he had the sense that she was thinking something through rather than stalling. I know Meridian Racing, she said. He looked at her. 3 years ago, I acquired a partial stake in their primary technical sponsor, a component manufacturing group. Due diligence required me to review their major client portfolios. Meridian was the flagship. I read through the performance documentation from 218 and 219. She paused. Your name was on the engine systems reports. All of them. He was still. Not surprised exactly, more like watching something distant resolve into focus. I remembered it because those were the years the team outperformed every financial and competitive projection, she said. And then the year after those reports stopped having your name on them, the team dropped from first to third. Everyone in the industry attributed it to driver rotation. But I'd read the engineering reports, and I knew it wasn't the drivers. Dominic said nothing. There was nothing to add to it. They called you 17 times, she said. Yes. You didn't answer. Ella was 3. Charlotte looked at him for a long moment. There was no judgment in it, and no performance of understanding either, just the look of someone who had made enough hard choices to recognize the shape of another one. What did you actually want when you walked in here this morning? She asked. He did not hesitate. A stable job. Enough to cover rent and my daughter's school fees. Regular hours. That's it? That's the whole thing. She turned the tablet over once in her hands. Looked at the car. Looked at him. Then she said, "All right." Jason was waiting when they came back into the showroom. He had regrouped in the 20 minutes they had been in the technical bay, the looseness replaced by a careful, managed composure. Beside him, Isaac stood slightly apart, having already reported his findings to Charlotte by text. Charlotte stopped in the center of the showroom floor. The overhead track lighting fell evenly across everything. Jason. Her voice was the same temperature. It always was. Not cold, not warm. Steady. The senior technical advisory position for VIP services. Is it still open? It's yes. But as I mentioned, we were looking for someone with direct industry. Isaac confirmed the brake issue this morning. The deviation Dominic identified is accurate. We'll need to inspect all 12 units in the current consignment. She looked at Jason without expression. He found it in under 2 minutes on the showroom floor, without instruments. Jason's jaw tightened very slightly. He shifted to a fallback position the way practice people shift without appearing to. The role requires more than diagnostics. It's client-facing. It requires a certain fluency with the clientele. Did you ask him any technical questions during the interview? The question landed and stayed there. We don't generally. Did you ask him any technical questions? The room was quiet. Not dramatically quiet. Just the ordinary quiet of people nearby who are being careful with their breath. Jason said, "No." Charlotte nodded. Not in satisfaction. In the way you nod when a variable you expected to be uncertain turns out to be confirmed. She looked at Isaac. The interview process for technical advisory roles will include an engineering component going forward. I'll have my office send revised criteria by end of week. Isaac nodded. He did not look at Jason. Charlotte turned to Dominic. I'd like to offer you a position, she said. Not the one you applied for. Senior Director of Technical Services and Client Advisory. It oversees both the technical operations and the VIP customer experience function. It's a management track position. The role has been vacant for 4 months because we haven't found the right person. She stated the salary. Clearly, without decorating it or watching for his reaction, it was a real number. Not transformative, but stable, and more than he had expected, and enough to cover everything that needed covering with a margin left over. Standard hours, she continued. Monday through Friday. Saturday shifts are self-scheduled on a rotation. You'd have input on your own calendar once you're past the first 90 days. He processed the number. He processed the hours. He thought about Ella getting out of school at 3:30. He thought about the Honda. He thought about the bill on the kitchen table. My daughter gets out at 3:30, he said. That won't be a problem, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Not measuring, just present. I'll take it, he said. Jason said nothing. There was nothing for him to say that would help his situation, and he was experienced enough to know it. He stood with his arms slightly forward, his clipboard at his side, and absorbed the shape of what had happened with the expression of a man who would spend the rest of the afternoon deciding how to reclassify it in memory. Charlotte handed Dominic a card with her assistant's contact. Come in Thursday to complete the paperwork. We'll go over the technical scope of the role, and I'll introduce you to the team leads. She turned toward the back of the showroom. Then she stopped. The Orion X9 issue, she said, not turning around. Write it up for me, whatever format you prefer. I want to send it to the manufacturer with your name on it. She walked away. Dominic stood in the center of the showroom floor for a moment. Mia was looking at him. She was holding his business card, which she had picked up from the counter when Charlotte had set it back down. She held it out to him. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. Keep it, he said, in case someone needs it. She looked at the card, then at him, and smiled, not the professional smile she had given him that morning, but a real one, the kind that happens before a person decides to do it. He nodded once, walked to the door, and pushed it open into the morning. The Honda started on the second try, which felt like progress. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment, with the engine running. The sun had moved since he'd arrived. The building's glass threw it at a different angle now. He put his hands on the wheel and did not do anything with them for a long moment. Then he took out his phone and called Mrs. Gallagher's number. Ella answered on the second ring. "Dad? Hey, kid." There was a pause, half a second of held breath, and then, "Did you get it?" "I got it." She did not say anything for a moment, and then she yelled. A full, unconstrained, 6-year-old yell of joy, wordless and total, and loud enough that Dominic heard Mrs. Gallagher laugh in the background. "Mrs. Gallagher. Mrs. Gallagher, my dad got the job." Dominic leaned his head back against the headrest. He closed his eyes. His shoulders, which had been holding a tension for so long, he had stopped noticing it as tension, and started noticing it as simply the shape of his own body came down. He sat there for a long moment, listening to Ella tell the news to everyone in the room, which appeared to be just Mrs. Gallagher and Button, but she told them with the thoroughness and enthusiasm of someone addressing a crowd. When she came back to the phone, her voice was slightly breathless. "I knew it," she said. "I knew they were going to like you. You were right. I'm always right." She said it in the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating a weather condition. "When are you coming to get me?" "Soon. Give me an hour." "Okay. Are you happy?" He thought about the question. He thought about it the way the question deserved to be thought about. Not the performance of answering, but the actual internal accounting of the state of things. "Yeah," he said. "I am. Good." And then, with total sincerity, "Button is happy too." He laughed. It was a short laugh, quiet, the kind that comes out when something catches you without warning. "Tell Button I said thanks." He hung up and sat another minute in the car, in the sun, in the ordinary morning that had quietly become something else. Then he put the Honda in drive and went to get his daughter. He picked her up still in her yellow pajamas, because Mrs. Gallagher had let her stay in them until noon on account of the occasion. Ella came down the front path at a run and hit him at the knees with the full weight of her enthusiasm and wrapped her arms around his legs, and Button got briefly crushed between them, and Dominic crouched down and held her for a long moment with his chin on the top of her head and her small hands clutching the back of his jacket. "Why are your eyes red?" she asked when he pulled back to look at her. "Dust," he said. She narrowed her eyes at him. "Dust or crying?" "Dust." She studied him with the unsentimental scrutiny of a child who has been lied to about simpler things than this and found out every time. Then she apparently decided to let him have it. "Okay." She took his hand. "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" "We can have pancakes for dinner." "With the chocolate chips?" "With the chocolate chips." She walked beside him to the car, holding his hand and Button simultaneously, narrating the events of her morning with Mrs. Gallagher in the detailed, non-linear way of someone for whom all information has equal weight. The trip to get a library book, the discovery of a spider above Mrs. Gallagher's kitchen window, the debate about whether the spider had been there yesterday. He listened to all of it. On the way home, she sat in the back seat and pressed her face to the window and watched the buildings pass. After a few minutes, she asked, without turning from the window, "What's the name of the lady who hired you?" "Charlotte." "Is she nice?" He thought about it. Not whether Charlotte was nice, that was too small a word for what he had observed, but how to explain to a 6-year-old the thing that had actually happened in that building. He thought about a woman who walked into a room and noticed things other people had decided not to notice, who asked direct questions and waited for real answers, who gave a job to a man not because he fit the picture on a form, but because she recognized the thing he could actually do. "She saw me," he said, "when she didn't have to." Ella turned from the window. She considered this with her whole face, the way she considered things. Then she nodded once, with the finality of someone closing a case. "Then she's the right person," she said. He caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. She was looking at him steadily, Button held against her chest, the yellow pajamas bright against the afternoon coming through the window. "Yeah," he said, "she is." That evening the kitchen light was yellow and low again, the same as it had been in the morning, but everything in it was different in the way that the same room is different when the thing you have been carrying has been set down. Dominic stood at the stove making pancakes batter from scratch, because Ella had specified from scratch, and there was now enough reason to use the good batter, while Ella sat on the counter beside the mixing bowl, with her legs swinging, telling him about the spider again, adding new details she had remembered. The overdue bill was still on the table. He had not moved it, but at some point during the pancakes, between the second and the third, he picked up a pen from the counter and wrote at the bottom of the bill, under the red stamp, *Pay Friday. Not a triumph, not a conclusion, just the next thing clear and possible and real, the way things become real when the ground under them is finally solid. He flipped the last pancake. Ella reached for the chocolate chips. Button sat upright against the sugar canister, present and accounted for, as always. Outside the kitchen window, the city was going toward evening. Inside, the light was warm, and for the first time in a long time, tomorrow had a shape to it.